But we'll jump right in. First of all, I just want to ask, you co-chair the House Democratic Commission on AI and the Innovation Economy, which was stood up pretty recently. And so what is the commission's agenda for this Congress, and what can it accomplish that individual legislation just can't?
So for those of you who don't know, last Congress there was a bipartisan committee on AI in the House of Representatives. The Speaker this year decided to disband that committee, so we thought it was very, very important for the Democrats to have a perspective and to be out there. You know, we can't just let Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders speak for our views on AI. That would be completely off base. So many of us thought, like, listen, how do we actually put together a proper framework with where we need to go as a Congress and a country on AI? Obviously, that touches a lot of different aspects of society. And so our job is to put together the Democratic perspective on AI in the House of Representatives and a legislative agenda. I'm hoping we win the House in a few months, and we'll be governing next year. And so it's very important that we have put forward a clear perspective and a legislative agenda.
No, thank you.
And we meet with, by the way, just so you know, we meet with, our job is to meet with everyone. So all different companies and stakeholders, and of course members of Congress too, and get their perspective. But we want to take in as much input as possible as we're thinking through all these issues.
Thank you. And if you don't know, one of Congressman Gottheimer's defining traits is that he works very well across the aisle and also works well with a great degree or a broad range of stakeholders, to your point. And I think to that, right, like one of the main ways that folks have come together in Congress recently has been China competition, and you've been a clear voice about this the entire time. Your work on the DeepSeek bill, the AI security playbook, and the argument that we're in a race we have to win has been consistent and clear, and you've also said that we have to win the right way. We can't just win, which I love to hear. Right. And can you tell me, what does that mean to you, and then how do we get there?
So you have to look at this as a Cold War, a new Cold War, our competition with China and we got to win, but to win, you need a war plan, and I think part of how I'm thinking through our strategy is how do we lay out this plan, and how do we make sure that when we meet again in a few years, China continues to be behind us and not ahead of us in this race. And that's why manufacturing policy matters, but doing it the right way, making sure that DeepSeek, you brought up, there's no reason why DeepSeek, that platform, that anybody in government should be allowed to use DeepSeek, in my opinion. I don't know why we would be giving any kind of advantage, an informational advantage, to our number one adversary, who doesn't exactly play by the rules. We've got to win the compute fight. A lot of that's going to be, this is where things like energy policy domestically are so important. We need more energy. We have to have more supply, just like we need to fight for more compute. And we need to make sure we're set up to win, but we also think through the different ways this is going to affect life and talk about it, right? You can't just pretend, put your head in the sand and pretend this stuff's not happening. You have to say, here are all the great benefits of AI domestically that we could use it for, that are going to be great for society, from healthcare to education to running government more efficiently, to, by the way, here are the things we should be talking about, the challenges are ahead, like energy, right? Like workforce impact. How do we make sure that we go after deep fakes, and how we smart about how we verify, and they're all right, and make sure our kids are safe and families are safe. There's a lot of things we have to think through here, and that's on us to work with all of you to think through it.
And so what do you think about kind of like those accountability standards? How do you think about making the right accountability standards, both for like a trustworthiness and also to avert the risks that we're talking about?
I mean, first off, from a government perspective, you need the transparency standards are very important. I also think you kind of need a one-stop shop in government for AI. You can't have it that 50 different agencies are all doing 50 different things, and that if you are somebody doing business with the government, that you're all over, who needs approvals, that you have to go all over the place to get those and try to figure it out. That's not going to make us fast and efficient and safe and accountable. So you need accountability standards, and some of them need to be required, and others I think can be cooperative, but you need those in place. Things like deep fakes, and there's legislation already passed to be able to take things down, but I think it's very important that you have things like watermarks and in the metadata, and actually if I put up something positive, I should be able to say this is me, and there should be a way of marking that. Because you can see why, if it's political or anything else, you could really AI, if used the wrong way, can cause a lot of problems. But there's things we can do, and we should be doing those things now and thinking through those things now. And when there's new revs going out, and we have to have platforms checking other platforms and making sure especially when it comes to national security issues, and I'm on the intelligence committee, and this is something we think about all the time, what are we doing to ensure that we're safe and it's not used in a way that actually could cause us harm?
Right, yeah, I woke up to a funny text from a friend from whom it was unusual to get this text. It was like, Iran's got some really good AI slop right now. It's like, things I didn't anticipate in 2026, but maybe I should have. You have the AI Workforce Training Act, which we've been supportive of, and it uses a tax credit as a primary mechanism. So 30% of qualifying training expenses, up to $2,500 per employee. Can you walk us through the thinking and why the tax code is the right place for this, and what do you see as a path to getting American workers broadly ready for an AI transformed economy?
Well, you just said it. We got to be ready for a transformed economy, and you can't. This goes back to, it's here. We're not like some of my colleagues are like, we got to just stop this thing. I'm like, stop this thing? What are you going to put it like in a package somewhere and ship it? Like, what do you mean? And so, like, the question is, how are you ready for it? And I think the best way from a workforce perspective, that we get people ready, is we train them to use it. Because if you learn how to use the tools properly, you can do your job more efficiently, and it lets our economy grow, and will ensure that you're there and you have a job in the future. That's the kind of stuff we have to be thinking about it, but it's about training, and we should give incentives for people to do that training. I also think our education system, both K-12 and college, needs to change, right? Like I was at one of the platforms recently, and I was in the Valley, and I was looking in a room of where they're doing product development, and it was mostly programmers who came in from China, right? And I said, well, why so, what's going on here? He said, listen, we're not doing a good enough job in our own schools training and readying our students for the future here. So we've got to think of, from badging perspective, or shifting away with some of our curriculum works, to being prepared for this new economy. Just like, by the way, all of major transitions in society's history, we went from an agrarian to an industrial. Like, it changed the way we teach. It changed some of our education. Like, why aren't we doing the same thing? And by the way, in the Congress, we're still built our committee structure, the way things are set up. They're still set up from 100 plus years ago. The Agriculture Committee still has some of the best space in town, right? But that was the hot committee to be on in the 1800s, right? Right, and I get it. Listen, some people still want to be there because they come from an agrarian area, right, a more rural district. But we've got to rethink. I also think our structure in Congress to be ready for this new future, which again, very exciting if done smart and right, and that's how we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because it's like we have to work with mechanisms still from that past. So we've been working on how can you get that information into districts around the country, and the thing you come to is the Agriculture Extension, Cooperative Extension Program, because that's the only thing that exists like that,
Exactly.
So I think to that point, right, you're talking about education being a huge vector. People have to make decisions about certain things close to home, but we also can't have a 50-state regulatory framework that's very divergent. So when you think about what are the things that should stay close to home, what should the carve-outs be pretty much under any scenario of preemption or under most scenarios of preemption?
So, I've been publicly supportive of ensuring that we have some sort of national approach and not thinking about everything state by state. It's a very, as you point out, it's a very difficult way to operate if you have every state with different rules, and there's certain things from a national security perspective that we can't have our states doing. At the same time, we want to, whatever we do, if we have a federal preemption piece of legislation and framework and approach, we need to make sure that it's not just saying, okay, we need to centralize this. We're proactive with what solutions are in that bill. So when we think through things like kid safety, and we think through things like transparency and some of the accountability sides, we have to actually, and there's some disagreement here. I think you actually have to proactively put into the legislation some standards and what we need. And these things will evolve, but you want to be able to have some sort of baseline for that. I think in the states you're going to have to have certain carve-outs because there's state law, there's state criminal law. There's certain ways, and there's state energy policies. There's certain things that we're going to have to think about from a state perspective. There's too many to go through the whole list here. But it makes sense you got to start and say, like, what do we do at the state level that where it continues to make sense that we think about this from a state perspective, because we want states, of course, to be able to do what they do, and in particular to that individual state, but you have to have, but there's a lot of things that a state individually doesn't need to do, right, that we can centralize, and I think we can find the solution here. Like, I'm actually quite optimistic we can. It's politically hairy, but you know, all these things are challenging right now.
I'm like, I'll take optimism from any direction from all comers, so don't worry about it. What is something that in your district you hear from people about AI? What are the things when you go home, you go to town halls, you go to the grocery store, folks are bringing up to you?
I mean, I'll be honest that like the challenge that AI has overall, and I've said this to anybody who'll listen, is we got to do a much better job of selling the positives, and it's really not, you know, the good stuff rarely breaks through, and it's generally the bad stuff that takes the attention, and that's why you see all the polls out there. People are very negative about AI. Why? They're petrified about workforce implication. They see their utility bills going through the roof. In New Jersey, utility bills are up 45% in the last 2 years. That's a lot, especially given the cost of everything else people are dealing with. That's unacceptable. Part of that is because we just haven't produced enough energy, and that's also New Jersey's fault. Like in New Jersey, we just haven't, we need more natural gas, we need nuclear, we need an all-the-above strategy. We're also doing, we need strong alternatives, you need it all. But what people are talking to me about is like, oh my God, what are these data centers gonna do? What's gonna happen to my job? What does this mean for me, right? Like they're anxious about that. And that's because when they see certain companies going out and saying, we're gonna eat 20% of your jobs or 40% of your jobs are gonna be gone, that is not like a mess. When people hear that, what do you think they're gonna react? Like, obviously, we gotta explain to people, no, if this is done right, there'll be a, you know, we're gonna open up all these new kind of jobs and new opportunity. And by the way, this is your health. Your health is gonna be safer, and your kids' education is gonna be more tailored to them and better. And right, and government's gonna run more efficiently, which is obviously a shock to most. And right, you gotta paint a better picture of the opportunity and possibilities. Plus, we gotta kick China's ass on this. We gotta win. And I think that's also a really important thing. And from a competitive standpoint, explain to them from the future, we have to win for our national security, from our safety perspective, from our economic perspective. And we're gonna have a lot of countries around the world that line up behind one of us, depending on how we do in this race. And so we have no choice but to win and to do it the right way.
Thank you. And I know you got to run in 20 seconds. You have one last thing to say to the crowd, or are you ready to get out of here?
No, I just think the broader point is this is a very exciting time, and I think we should be optimistic, right? But we've got to, my ask, since all of you are involved in this space, my ask is go put a positive foot forward about the opportunity here and what this can do for our country and for people and like all the possibilities. And don't be closed off to saying we need smart AI, we need smart rules of the road. You want to make sure that we have smart rules of the road, because if it gets out of control and something bad happens, right, like it will have a negative impact on the space and shut down the possibilities. So right, there's a way to do this that is that will allow AI to grow and expand and for us to win and to do it in a smart way. And all of you have to help in that process. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, so keep it from screwing up so we can make good stuff. All right.
Exactly.
Sir, thank you so much.